What is going on? Welcome to the Second of Strength podcast, wherever you are. As always, I'm just grateful you're spending your valuable seconds with me. Today, we're going to talk a lot about value. We're going to talk about your value, your teenager's value. And what happened this week is there were some Senate hearings, some congressional hearings with big tech. So Facebook, Meta, who was there? Discord, TikTok, Snapchat, and X or Twitter. So they were all there getting, I guess, questioned by the Senate on their social media practices and the things that they do there. And there was one number in particular that really stood out to me. And since that hearing, I just cannot get this number out of my mind. And that number is $270. $270. $270 is the value that Meta puts on a teenager. Over the lifetime of a teenager with their involvement in social media, Instagram, Facebook, the value of that teenager is $270. That's what they think you're worth. And I have struggled a lot with that number over the last couple of days. And as I think about that number and I peel it back and I just think what they believe teenagers or we are worth is so low, it's crazy to me. And this isn't about financial markets and, Facebook making money or anything. That is just purely the value of a teenager. And how can we possibly put that kind of value and limit a teenager's life down to a single solitary number like that? And it drives me crazy to think about because I just think that teenagers are worth so much more. They're incredible, right? And they have this immense potential and this immense capability to become anything they want to become in this life. But here we are saying, you know what, you're only worth $270. And that number just can't be it. It's not good enough. It's not good enough for me. It's not good enough that we are devaluing our teenagers down to that sort of a level. And I think about, on the other side of that, teenagers are spending hours a day on devices, on social media. A recent Gallup study talked about the amount of time that teenagers are spending, and that 51% of teenagers are spending over 4 hours a day on social media, with the majority of that being YouTube. They're calling YouTube social media, which I agree with because of the YouTube shorts that they have now, even though there's not much social about it. But YouTube, TikTok, and then Instagram being the largest numbers and the largest amount of time that they're spending there. And I think about that and I think, well, if you're spending 4 hours, 4.8 hours a day or more on your device, but then they're only valuing it $270, I think, what are we actually doing with our time? Why are we spending so much time in a place where we are the product? We are ultimately the means to an end. Each one of us is the means to an end to big tech. They don't care about you. They just care about making more money. And the more teenagers that are on there, the better off they feel. And it went further in this congressional hearing that they talked about not just the value of teenagers being $270, they talked about how important Gen Alpha is. So the group coming up right behind the teenagers and how important they are. And that it's important to recruit Gen Alpha to social media before they turn into teenagers so that they can hook them in there, right? And they just talked about this tweens being this untapped potential, but they're not talking about potential in terms of value and self-worth and what you can possibly become. They're talking about potential into putting more people into that $270 wheel so that they can make more and more money. And so the very first thing is, teenagers, you got to know that you're worth way more than that. Adults, if you're listening to this, parents, you got to know that you're worth way more than that. And there is no value that somebody else can put on your life. And it's certainly, even if they could, it wouldn't be $270. That is just unacceptable to me in the way that they are framing that and putting the lifetime value of a teenager at $270. But what it comes down to is, it really comes down to your worth and your value and who you are, and raising your worth and raising your value to a point where you're not getting sidetracked by things like social media or things that are limiting who you are because it sees you as a number, or somebody else limits your value and just sees you as a means to an end at all. Those are the types of relationships that we need to cut out of our life or limit in our life so that we can become the person we want to become. And ultimately to me, it comes down to your thoughts, your feelings and your behaviors. That's what really builds your value, your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. And so it comes down to, what are you doing to make sure that you are increasing your value through your thoughts, through your feelings, and through your behaviors? And to me, a lot of that comes down to just a couple of different things. And the things that are, a few different things that I hope that we can take away from today's episode that you can start applying to your life, or, to build up or eliminate things from your life in certain instances. And so part of this comes down to how you're spending your time, who you're spending your time with, and where you're spending your time. Those three things are going to have the biggest impact on your value than anything else. How you're spending your time, who you're spending your time with, and where you're spending your time. And when it comes to how you're spending your time, we have to be really careful with time. Time is the one thing that, it's the one resource. Everybody's got the same amount of it, but nobody can, but we can all use it differently. But when you think about it, you think about the most successful people in the world, you think about, people who either incredible philanthropists, or you think of people who have excelled in business or excelled in school or whatever it is. It really just comes down to time management and how they've been able to spend that time. And I believe that we are either spending our time creating, or we're spending our time consuming. And the problem with social media today is that social media used to be social media. It used to be a place that you would go so that you could communicate with your friends, communicate with people, and create this bond in this community. And that was like the early days of Facebook, but that's no more. Social media is not, in any sense, a building of relationships anymore. It is completely the consumption of media. That's what it is. That's what content creators are. They're people who are creating content so that you will consume content, so that Facebook, Instagram, and those people can make more money, so that you can be valued at $270. That's what they're doing. So if time is the one resource that is constant and consistent for everyone, it really comes down to, how are you using your time? I talk a lot about distraction, and that the dopamine that these devices have and that social media has, and that it continually draws you and pulls you in, so that you're stuck there, right? Because it feels good. I call it the feel good funnel, and it feels good. It feels great. It's fun. It's just consumption. And we want more and more and more of it. And so we get stuck in this rut where we are just consuming things. But I believe that if we are always in consumption mode, then we're not in creation mode. And if we're not in creation mode, then we're just simply not in growth mode. And if we're not in growth mode, then that's where I think that we are limiting our value and limiting our potential, because who we can become is based on the amount of time we spend becoming the person we want to become. And if we're spending all our time consuming other people's content and consuming other people's stuff, then we aren't focusing on us becoming who we want to be. And so what I'd like you to do is I would like you to pause. I'd like you to be still. I would like you to separate yourself from social media, distance yourself from it. I would like you to just be without it for a little bit, and think about who you are and who you can become. Think about the good things that you do, the things that you excel at, the things that you're really good at, and the things that you need to be spending more time in to continue to build and continue to grow. And I guarantee, of all those things, none of it is scrolling social media. It just isn't. It's just not going to be scrolling social media. So where are the other aspects of your life that you can be leaning into so that you can be better and better and better and become more and more and more? Because how you spend your time will determine what your value ultimately becomes. And, value is one of these things that is really internal, but if we are constantly just consuming and watching other people's content, then we are never going to fulfill ourselves enough to the point that we can embrace and appreciate our value. So get to know yourself, pause, spend some time with yourself. What do you do well? What can you lean into, and how can you spend that time? The second piece of this is who you spend your time with. Now, we can spend our time with people who build ourselves up, build us up or people who don't? There's a common saying, I don't know who said it first, but there's a common phrase in personal development and growth that you are the result of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I would invite you to think about who those 5 people are. And if you imagine that you only had 5 people in a circle that you could give your time to, that you could give your energy to, who are those 5 people? And the question I would ask you is, are those 5 people lifting you up and giving you more energy, or are they draining you and sucking energy from you? Because that's the key indicator here is somebody who is lifting you up and helping you be better and helping you, challenge your thoughts and growth so you can step into your potential. Those are the types of people that are going to help you grow and grow and grow. A lot of people join these mastermind programs now where it's, just learning and growing and those are great if that's your thing. If it's not, that's fine. But ultimately the thought process behind that is surrounding yourself with people who make you think and help you grow, because that is where ideation comes from. That is where, personal growth comes from. It comes from challenging the norm, because ultimately what it comes down to is stepping out of your comfort zone. Who is helping you step out of your comfort zone? Or are the people in your circle sucking you deeper into your comfort zone? And so there's another thought that I've, said before. Oh, here's my dog running downstairs. Okay, he's out of here. There's another thought that I've used in the past that is really, just because somebody is in your circle doesn't mean that they are in your corner. Just because somebody's in your circle does not mean that they are in your corner. And I'd like you to think about that. The people that are surrounding you, the people that are with you, are they really your people? Or are they using you for some reason? And if they're using you, then they are diminishing your value, not increasing your value. So who you hang out with is really important. And then along with that, the person that you hang out with most is yourself. You are with yourself all the time. And I've talked on this podcast before. You can go back a few episodes, but I talk about your thoughts and negative thoughts. And if we are constantly bombarding ourselves with negative thoughts, then we are ultimately our own worst enemy. We are decreasing our value. And so the question is, well, what do I do? How do I stop that? And that's where I always talk your 1 second of strength. If you have negative thoughts, stop it in that moment and say something positive about yourself. And this will take practice, but it will help. There's a statistic that your brain remembers negative thoughts 7 times more than it does positive thoughts, 7 times more. And so even the smallest of negative thoughts are impacting you at a 7x than those positive thoughts. So that makes it so much more important that we talk positively to ourselves, we think positively, and that we build that respect and that relationship with ourselves. And when we start to do that, we start to embrace who we are. We start to raise our value up way over $270. We start to raise ourselves up. And when we do that, then we stop accepting negative in our life. And you got to stop accepting negative in your life, both from people around you and from yourself, because you're better than that and you're worth more than that. So in the moment, find your 1 second of strength, think positive thoughts, walk away from those negative thoughts, and it'll help you in those moments. And it truly does just take 1 second. You have 1 second where you can overtake your brain. You can hack your brain in any given moment to overcome and stop thinking those negative thoughts. So how you spend your time, who you spend your time, and then ultimately where you spend your time. We've talked a little bit about this a couple minutes ago on this episode, but ultimately, where are you spending your time? If time is this limited resource, and I think about this for a second. So if you sleep for 7 hours a night, 8 hours a night, right? And then you go to school or you go to work for X amount of hours a day, and then you've got other activities that you've got to be doing, and then you spend 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day scrolling social media, your time is gone. Like literally all the time for growth, for productivity, for who you want to become, it's all gone in that time because you're spending all that time sleeping. You're spending all that time on social media. And I'm not advocating sleeping less. That is not the advocation. In fact, sleep is a critical piece of increasing your value, because when we don't get enough sleep, it reduces our cognitive ability. And when we reduce our cognitive ability, it reduces our ability to think clearly. And when we're not thinking clearly, we are more prone to think negatively about ourselves. Think about that. So lack of sleep reduces our cognitive thought, which leads to negative self-talk. And so it's in these moments where we have to really take a look at the time that we're spending online, on social media, in places where we should not be spending our time. And I say this to teenagers when I go and speak in schools. I'm not anti-social media. I'm only anti-social media when it starts stealing your self-worth. And it starts stealing your self-worth when you spend so much time on it and you start comparing your life to other people. So the key is to spend less time on social media, or only spend intentional time on social media. If you spend intentional time on social media, you know you're going to be on there for X amount of time. You're going to scroll for that amount of time. That's fine. But at that time, take it away, right? Pull the pacifier away, go do something else. And it's that type of thing that will help to increase your value, because you won't be comparing yourself to other people. There's a statistic that if teenagers are spending the average amount of time that teenagers spend on YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok, then they're spending 71 days of their year on that device. 71 days of their year. And that's 20% of a teenager's year. And I think of that 20% of time and I go, well, that's 20% of the time that you are opening yourself up to comparison. That's 20% of your time that you are not creating things in your life. That's 20% of your time that you're not building positive relationships. That's 20% of your time that you're opening yourself up to cyberbullying. That's 20% of your life that you could be increasing your value. Instead, you're watching other people on social media and it's simultaneously decreasing your value. So this is where we have a huge opportunity to impact our thoughts, impact our feelings, impact our beliefs by the amount of time, by where we spend our time, who we spend it with, how we spend it, and where we spend it. And it's those little things that will increase your value enough to where you're able to withstand and overcome the challenges you're facing today, because there's a lot of them. So this week, the focus is your self-worth. The focus is your value, and raising it as much as you can while limiting the places and things that are decreasing your value and your worth, namely social media, negative self-talk, and negative relationships that are not helping you and that are actually hurting you. And if you can do that, I promise you'll live a happier life. So that number, $270 that Facebook and Instagram place on a teenager's life, I just don't buy that. There's teenagers are worth way, way, way more than that. It's my job to make sure that you believe that and that you feel that every single day. So wherever you are, thank you for being here. If this helped you, go leave a review for the show. Share it with somebody else. It helps me if you leave a review for the show. But share it with your teenager. Share it with someone that you love in your life so that it can help them too. And I'll leave you the way I always do. Go find your 1 second of strength and be happy.